Hi, and welcome to Digital Defense. I am your host, Jordan Robertson. This is our weekly cybersecurity and digital privacy show, broadcasting to you live from the Bloomberg News offices in Washington, D.C. Wherever you're watching this show, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope or any other platform, Bloomberg Terminal, this is your show. This is an interactive show. I've been covering cybersecurity and privacy for over a decade, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear your questions and comments. And wherever you're watching this, please feel free to write those down in the comment section. I'll get those in real time, and we'll try to respond to as many of them as we can in the time we have allotted. This week, we're going to be talking about Bluetooth. Bluetooth, obviously a technology that's on all our devices, not just phones, but medical devices, cars, airplanes. If you could imagine it, Bluetooth is there. Obviously, very useful technology. We use it for all kinds of things. But I want to talk about some recently disclosed security vulnerabilities that are pretty major inside Bluetooth. And as regular viewers of the show will know, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how the vulnerabilities worked and which specific versions of software and this and that. It's not that kind of show. What I do want to do is talk a little bit about kind of basic security hygiene when it comes to technologies like Bluetooth, which again, we all use, we all find very useful and very helpful. But as this week's disclosures showed, hackers love to take advantage of these things that connect us all. And those are some of the weakest points in our home networks, in our digital lives. So I want to walk you through what the latest developments are and how you can protect yourself, and really how you should think about some of these communication technologies beyond Bluetooth as you go about your daily lives. So we'll just dive right in. So this week there was a major Bluetooth security update. There were some researchers in Israel that discovered some pretty interesting stuff. These are the guys right here. This is their paper. They discovered some really interesting stuff about the way certain Bluetooth implementations operate. Without going into too many details, every type of communication technology, whether it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever, there is an authentication handshake, if you will, when your device, say it's your smartphone, when that connects to, let's say, your home Wi-Fi router. There's an authentication handshake that says, are you the router I'm expecting? And the router is saying, are you the phone that I'm expecting? And then they do a handshake, and then you communicate kind of as normal. This all happens behind the scenes, and increasingly, more and more seamlessly, as well as Bluetooth. I mean, Bluetooth, when you turn it on, some of us may have it on all the time, but when you turn it on, what happens with Bluetooth is, like any other wireless technology or any other radio technology, it basically sends out a broadcast. It says, hey, what's in my neighborhood? And if you've ever kind of looked at the networks and the devices that come back, when you do this, when you turn on, your Bluetooth, let's say with your smartphone, what you'll discover is it picks up a lot. It'll pick up things in your home, it'll pick up things in neighbors' homes, it'll pick up things on the street. What nobody wants is for your home, your home TV, your smartphone to connect to everything, right? I mean, you don't want your Bluetooth to connect to everything that's available out there. That's just not going to be very helpful to your life. What you want it to do is seek out the devices that you have authenticated it to, and connect to those. And for many people, that's like their home stereo system. Could be baby monitors, could be medical devices, things like that. And when that outreach happens, the reason I'm giving this background is it's really relevant to this discussion, is when that outreach happens, your phone, again, is looking for an authenticated partner in communication. It is looking for, the Bluetooth device that it has previously been paired with. We're all familiar with what that process looks like. You connect a device, you authenticate them both, and you're off to the races. Well, what these Israeli researchers discovered is that in some forms of Bluetooth, that handshake, that authentication, could be corrupted by attackers to figure out the encryption keys that are exchanged. Again, I'm not going to go into too many details. It doesn't really matter for this discussion. But the big picture is, when your device does that handshake, there's an exchange or a validation of the encryption keys that will secure that communication. If a hacker can intercept or replicate or steal those keys from either device, they can start intercepting traffic. Now, you might think, well, I'm using Bluetooth to connect my phone to my car stereo so I can listen to Spotify when I'm driving, right? Not the world's greatest data leak, if data were to leak. However, when you think about it in reverse, instead of my phone going to my car stereo, think about it this way. What if the car stereo gives the hackers a way into your phone? Then it becomes a much more serious issue. So the issue with any of these communication technologies is that it's a two-way street. So whatever device you're connecting to, whether it's a public Wi-Fi hotspot, which are always dangerous, but we all use them, and I would never say don't use them at all, but they're very dangerous. The danger is not that whatever you're doing at that time will leak. Because let's say you don't do banking, when you're on a public Wi-Fi hotspot. You're obviously not doing banking when you're driving and listening to Spotify connected to your car radio. But what happens is if criminals are able to intercept those communications and eavesdrop on the way your phone is communicating with something else, they have a way potentially to get inside your phone. And that's really the danger here. And when you extrapolate this out to not just phones, but again, medical devices, baby monitors, things in your car, the radio is just one technology that uses this stuff. Then you start to get into a different territory of when these wireless communications technologies get hacked, when there are vulnerabilities. It really is worthy of discussion about how much of this stuff is out there and what we as ordinary consumers can do to protect ourselves. So I want to walk you through a couple of my suggestions for what to do about this particular vulnerability, even though there's not a whole lot you can do, but just more broadly, how do you protect yourself against hackers that are seeking to exploit these ubiquitous technologies, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, et cetera. So again, this initial Bluetooth, the Bluetooth vulnerability we're talking about this week involves insecure exchange or validation of encryption keys. But more broadly, this is a class of vulnerabilities that exists within Bluetooth and other wireless technologies that we're all susceptible to. We're all carrying around devices that are potentially susceptible to these kinds of things. So I've got a few suggestions as well. And we've got some questions coming in as well, so why don't I get to a few of those first, and we'll get back to the topic at hand of some suggestions about protecting yourself from insecure Bluetooth. And again, wherever you're watching this, if you're just joining us, whether it's on Facebook or the Bloomberg terminal or elsewhere, this is an interactive show. This is your show. I want you to be able to write in with any questions you have about cybersecurity or digital privacy, even if it's off topic from what we're discussing today. I've been covering the topic for, over a decade, so hopefully we'll be able to provide you some answers about your questions of the day. One of the questions that's come in here, should we be worried about public Wi-Fi? I do have an answer to that. This relates to the topic at hand because, again, it's another wireless technology. So public Wi-Fi in many ways is great, and regular viewers of this show will know I am not a sky is falling type of journalist on these issues. I know we all need to use these technologies from time to time. It's very easy to say, disconnect from the world, disconnect from the internet, don't use Facebook, don't use public Wi-Fi, you'll be totally secure. That's just not true. So I don't believe in that kind of, that method of advice giving. So the viewer is asking, should we be concerned about public Wi-Fi? The short answer is yes, and. So yes, you should be concerned about public Wi-Fi. It is essentially, an unknown network that you are allowing your phone to connect to. Now, again, a lot of people view it as harmless because, maybe I won't do online banking when I'm on the public Wi-Fi hotspot. A lot of us know, don't do sensitive stuff on the public Wi-Fi because it's possible somebody else is examining your traffic. But that's not really the biggest danger of those hotspots. The biggest danger is you connect to them. You're allowing essentially, a stranger's network, which is administered by, I don't know, the mall you're going to, the city center you're strolling through, or whatever, to not only connect to your phone, but to connect to your phone in a way that it's a trusted device. You've allowed this device to connect to your phone. So I always advise people this way. I say, don't think about it in terms of what is going out of your device into that untrusted space. Think about what's coming into your phone and what potentially could come into your phone, because that's what hackers want. They're not just looking at the here and now. What they're looking at is, can I get onto these devices? Does it belong to somebody interesting? Do they have valuable data there? And so anytime you connect to a public Wi-Fi hotspot, you may potentially be downloading code that you don't want to have access to your device, and there's really no way to tell if that's happening. So I'm not going to tell you not to use public Wi-Fi. We certainly all use it. There's certainly value there. But just be aware that when you perform that handshake, when your device, whether it's your laptop, your smartphone, whatever, performs that handshake and authenticates to that network, you are allowing code to come into your device that hopefully is not malicious, but might be. And you're not going to know if your phone gets hacked that way. Most likely, you're not going to know. So just be careful with it. My advice always is, this gets back to the Bluetooth discussion. My advice for Bluetooth, public Wi-Fi, whatever, is just turn those technologies off when you're not using them. For example, I, like everybody else, use Bluetooth. I think it's great. It's really convenient. It's really helpful. But I don't leave it on all the time. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be 100% secure. Well, all that means is that, I have some control over when it is broadcasting, because that's the time when you would mainly get hacked using vulnerabilities like the one disclosed this week, the Bluetooth one, or any other wireless vulnerabilities. It's when your device is broadcasting. So a lot of people turn off things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi for the battery, which is a perfectly legitimate reason. It does save your battery if you're not constantly on. The reason it saves your battery is you're not constantly broadcasting. And it's that broadcasting that can also make you vulnerable to hacking. So my advice, if you're not using the Wi-Fi, just turn it off. You'll save your battery and you'll protect yourself. You'll give yourself a layer of insulation against hackers. Same with Bluetooth. There's no reason to keep it on all the time. And if you think about it, what you're essentially doing if you keep something like Bluetooth on all the time is you are broadcasting something that's very valuable, which is your hardware identifier. To anybody and everybody who might be around you at a given time. And the reason that's so significant is even if you don't pair up with those devices, what you're doing is broadcasting to the world at large and any networks that you may encounter that, hey, I as a unique individual with a unique hardware identifier am here. If you're interested in me, this is where to hack me. So my advice is always just turn it off if you don't need it and turn it on when you do. It's very simple and it helps you avoid a lot of these problems. Next question here. If my wireless headphone gets hacked, what can hackers even take from me? What about my phone? Very good question. It gets to the heart of this Bluetooth idea. So as I said at the top of the show, Bluetooth's on everything. It's on phones and laptops, as the viewer notes, wireless headphones and things like that. So if somebody gets onto your wireless headphone, what's the big deal? It's a very good question because there's nothing on your headphone. There's nothing on your headset at all, really. It's just a conduit to, and the answer to that question is why you should be concerned. It's not the headphone so much that's the problem, is what is that connected to? The headphone is probably connected to either your home stereo system or your phone or some other device in your home that does have more valuable information. So Bluetooth on its own doesn't really do much. You got to connect it to something. And it's usually that thing it's connected to that you have to be concerned about. So as I said at the top of the show, the vulnerabilities disclosed this week in Bluetooth concerned the security or lack thereof in that trusted handshake that happens when one Bluetooth device pairs or connects with another. So in the viewer's case, and hopefully I'm answering your question here, you're pairing your wireless headset to something else. If that something else is of value to you, or has data that's of value to you, whether it's your phone or your laptop or or some other device in your house, then potentially what you're doing is you're opening up a channel of attack into that trusted device. Again, it's not the wireless headphones that anybody would be after. But I'll answer that question in a slightly different way via an analogy. As I said, I've been covering cyber for many, many years. And one of my favorite examples of the dangers of some of these connected devices like headsets or refrigerators or toasters or whatever is we wrote a story for Business Week, a cover story a couple years back, about how easy it is to hack into hospitals. And my favorite example from that reporting was this idea that there was a security firm out there that had very closely tracked I think it was an Eastern European cybercrime gang. And they had infected these hospitals very deeply to steal patient data. That was their MO. What they wanted was patient data that could be monetized, sold and monetized in other ways. And the way they got there, though, they were scanning these hospitals because what they wanted was medical data. Scanning these hospitals, looking for any vulnerable device. And in this case, the analogy would be equivalent to the wireless headset. They were looking for any vulnerable devices on these networks as kind of a staging area for future attacks, to get deeper in the network, to perform reconnaissance and such. It just so happened the devices that were vulnerable that they got on were these really sensitive devices called blood gas analyzers. So these are highly specialized pieces of equipment that exist within hospitals that contain patient data, and also run Windows. So, you know, these are medical devices that can cause real problems if they're corrupted or if they fail or if something the hackers are doing on them causes them to crash. But from the hacker's perspective, and I'll never forget this, talking to security researchers, I said, is it your sense that the hackers even knew that what they were on was a blood gas analyzer? And they laughed. They said, of course not. Like, you know, what they knew is that they were on a vulnerable Windows machine or series of machines inside a hospital setting that had access to patient data, both internally to itself, but also in terms of the networks it was connected to. So going back to the headphones example, if a hacker is able to get on your headphones, they're going to pretty quickly see, this is not really where I want to be, but oh, look over here, it's connected to something that's even more interesting. And again, a lot of these are very targeted attacks. A lot of these take a lot of work. You know, but the idea being anytime you open up a channel of communication, especially if it's wireless, you know, you open up the possibility, again, not of data going out, but of data coming in. And if you're connecting sensitive devices to those networks, you just have to beware. You know, and the headline for the show shouldn't be secure your wireless headphones, but it should be secure sensitive devices that you own that you do connect to these wireless networks. That's kind of the biggest, you know, the biggest takeaway for me. Hopefully that answers your question. We got some great questions coming in. Again, we'll answer as many of these as we can, so please feel free to type them in if you've got questions about today's topic, which is Bluetooth and wireless security, or any other cybersecurity or privacy topic. I'm game for all of them. I do get a real-time feed here. So next question here. Is it more dangerous to save information regarding passwords or bank accounts on the smartphone as opposed to saving it on your laptop? You know, from my perspective, there's not a huge difference. I think I understand where the viewer is going with this question, which is, okay, so if it's insecure potentially to save information on your smartphone because you're connecting your smartphone to Bluetooth all the time, much more common than you know, than a laptop, you know, does it make more sense than to just save that information on your desktop or laptop? Here's my answer to that. It's not inherently insecure to use any of these technologies. It's all about how you use them. So, you know, a lot has been made. You know, when I first started covering this topic, the idea of encrypting traffic over public Wi-Fi was kind of like the new hot thing. I mean, this was like, if you were really cutting edge, you did that if you were a website. You know, if you were a website that had encryption on the communication between users and your website, even over public Wi-Fi, that was considered like a gee whiz thing. That's amazing. You know, now, if you're a bank or you're Google, you're Facebook, or you're whoever, and you don't do that, you know, that's a huge red flag. So now it's become commonplace to secure that traffic much better. So in response to that, what I would say is this, is that mobile technology has in general gotten much more secure. You know, there are ways to save information, to the viewer's question, about your banking, you know, password. You know, or your passwords to other sensitive accounts. There are ways to save those on your device that are not inherently insecure. My position is always this. If you need something to make your life easier, like saving your banking password on your smartphone, then I say do it. Like, if that's important to you to have that convenience, I think way too much of the cybersecurity community gets caught up in, well, it could be hacked this way, so don't do it. That's not reasonable, and that's not feasible for most people. That's just not the way we live our lives. So my hope is that this show is kind of an antidote to that. So what I would say is this, is if it's convenient for you, it's useful to you, and we all get these warnings, you know, we get these alerts, these pop-ups, like, do you want Google to save your password? Do you want Google to save your credit card number? If that's an added convenience for you, and you find it makes your life easier, then I say just do it. But again, going back to some of the advice I had earlier in the show, you know, it is helpful to take some very basic cybersecurity, hygiene, safety steps. And the biggest one that's relevant to this show today is keep your Wi-Fi off and keep your Bluetooth off when you're not using it. Now, when you get home and you want to connect to your Wi-Fi, or you get to work and you want to connect to the work Wi-Fi, then you just turn it back on. It doesn't mean you're not going to get hacked. It just reduces the likelihood that you could be hacked at all the other times that you're out and about in the world. So that's what I would say to that. It's not so much that your laptop is any more secure, because laptops connect to Wi-Fi, laptops run Windows, Windows gets attacked all the time. The most secure thing, funniest part about talking to security experts is you'll hear this from a lot of people, involves elections especially, that the most secure technology is paper technology. It is analog technology. The reason I bring up elections is it's always amusing to me to hear these, you know, these really high-end cryptologists and really sophisticated and smart cybersecurity experts talk about the solution to any of this election hacking business is to just have a paper trail, have an auditable paper record. That's the way to secure elections. So you can check if anything's been tampered with. So digital technology is not always a solution. So I'm not going to come down on the side of, well, your laptop's going to be more secure than your phone, because that's just not really true. But I would say if you've got something that's really, really sensitive, like if you put a lot of value on your banking password and you're really paranoid about it getting hacked, then write it down. Don't allow your browser to save it. Write it down, put it in a safe or something at home. Chances are you'll remember it most times, but that's pretty secure. Somebody would have to break into your house to steal that password. And if you've got an adversary that's that motivated to steal your banking password, you've got a whole host of problems that are beyond the scope of today's show. So hopefully that answers that question. The next question here is, do you have any insight into the new WPA3? Can't say I do. I believe the viewer's talking about certain encryption and security technologies for wireless standards. Not a space I follow super closely, but I will say this. Over time, again, even just in the course of my career covering this subject, we've seen a lot of improvement in wireless technologies and wireless security. It doesn't mean that wireless technologies can't be hacked. It just means that when you are securing a communication from one place to another, typically a website from a website user to the website itself, you want to have a reasonable expectation about the standard of security that you're going to get. And in general, we're there. Most big websites that most of us use have pretty decent encryption on them. The problem is not really the transit. The problem is not really there. The problem is the endpoints. And any savvy cybersecurity operator will tell you this, is that it's the endpoints you really have to worry about. It is your smartphone, it is your laptop, it is your home router, it is your workstation in the office. Those are the places you really have to worry about. And so I guess my big takeaway is, if you're cruising the internet on a public Wi-Fi hotspot, it's not so much that your traffic is going to be intercepted and read that you need to worry about these days. And that's what the viewer is referring to in terms of some of these wireless security standards. It's really about the security of the endpoint, the security of whatever you're connecting to that network. And that's the big takeaway from this week's show, or what I want to be the big takeaway, is whenever you're connecting wirelessly to anything, just remember you're allowing code to run on your device. That code, hopefully, is always going to be benevolent. There's not going to be anything malicious about any of that code. But the fact of the matter is, we live in a world where, especially if you're operating on the internet, you're going to be accepting code onto your devices that you just may not want. So it just really helps to limit what security people call the attack surface. You don't want to have all this stuff on all the time. So wherever you go, you could get hacked. Make it a little bit harder for the hackers. And I think that's kind of the best step. And always stay up to date with your security patches and such. But hopefully that gives you just a little bit more control over, at least I'm not broadcasting my hardware identifier to anybody all the time, everywhere I go. Because that just opens you up to a lot more attacks, and that's not going to be any fun. So with that, we are almost out of time here. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope this show is helpful. It's our intention with this show every week to bring you, kind of hopefully fresh insight on, the news of the week about cybersecurity and privacy stuff. And hopefully we do it in a slightly different way than a lot of the security commentary you might hear out there. Again, this is not a sky is falling show, and hopefully I give you practical advice that feels like it gives you a level of control over your digital information and your security. It's not all bad out there, although there's some parts of the cybersecurity world that are very, very bad and very, very ugly. But for most of us, on a day-to-day basis, again, the advice is the same. Turn off wireless communication when you're not using it, and when you are, just be aware of it, be mindful of it. And that will go a long way in terms of protecting yourself. And public Wi-Fi, if you don't have to use it, don't. It's just a risk you really may not want to take on. But if you absolutely must use it, just be aware that there's a lot of bad stuff happening on those places, and probably try to limit your use if you can at all. With that, thanks again for watching. Again, we broadcast live every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you have any more questions or comments, you can find me on Twitter, which is @JordanR1000, JORDAN, the letter R1000. Please feel free to go to our website as well, which is bloomberg.com/technology. That's the global technology homepage where you can find links to this show and lots of other great content. I want to thank our producer, Pia Gadkari, and everybody else who helps out with the show. With that, we'll sign off, and we'll see you next week on Digital Defense.